The coffin wasn't even closed when I grabbed the pastor's microphone and shoved him off the pulpit. Rip. Crack. Feedback screamed through the church. This man, I pointed at my dead husband's waxed-up face, gave me chlamydia. From my own sister. For 20 years. 4 of his 12 relatives charged the altar. My dress ripped at the shoulder. Aunt Linda clawed my neck. Wade, his nephew, swung a funeral wreath at my head like a wrecking ball. I ducked. Grabbed the communion chalice. Threw the wine straight into Wade's eyes. Then I slammed my palm down on the coffin lid. Nobody sits down until I'm finished. Especially him. The sheriff stood up in the back row. Sat right back down when he saw my face. Behind me, the organist started hyperventilating. Someone's grandma shouted, "Let her speak." I wiped the blood off my collarbone and smiled. "Thank you, Martha. Now. Let's talk about the second will he hid in the tractor shed." Wade staggered backward, purple wine dripping down his starched white collar and onto his preacher-issued necktie. Aunt Linda clutched the edge of the coffin like it might save her. 4 other relatives stood frozen halfway up the altar steps, unsure whether to tackle me or retreat. I had their attention now. "I buried this man for 37 years, I said into the microphone. Cooked his meals. Birthed his stillborn son in the back of a pickup truck during a hailstorm. Ran his dairy farm while he played poker at the VFW and told everyone in town I was too delicate for real work." A sound between a laugh and a cough came from the third row. Barb Jenkins. She'd seen my hands at the church bake sale last spring. Nothing delicate about fingers that could yank a breech calf out at 2 in the morning. "Ida May, you're hysterical," Wade sputtered, wiping his eyes. "Grief does things to a woman. Everyone understands. Just put down the grief." I swung the microphone toward him like a pistol. "Wade, I haven't grieved that man in 15 years. I just couldn't afford to leave him. But now he's dead, and you want to know the beautiful thing about a dead man?" Silence. He can't interrupt. I reached into my funeral dress, the one I'd bought at the Goodwill on County Road 12 because that cheating bastard had frozen our joint account 6 months before he died, and pulled out my phone. I have recordings. I have bank statements. I have the title to a boat he bought with our farm equity and docked 3 counties over under his girlfriend's name. Gasps rippled through the pews like wind through a cornfield. And I have the second will. The real one. The one your uncle signed the night before his tractor accidentally rolled into the drainage ditch and crushed his chest. Wade's face went the color of old milk. "You're lying." I hit play. Randy's voice filled the church. No drunken laughter this time. This was his business voice. Cold. Precise. The voice he used when he thought no one was listening. "Leave everything to Ida May Hollis. The house. The 300 acres. The dairy operation. The equipment. My nephew Wade gets nothing. He's a snake, and I raised a snake. The land goes to the woman who worked it. She earned it. Lord knows I didn't." The recording crackled. Then came Wade's voice, younger, sharper, recorded from a different conversation entirely. "She'll never see a dime, Uncle Randy. I've got the paperwork. I've got the lawyer. She signs what I tell her to sign, or we make her look crazy. Grief-stricken widow, unstable, unfit to manage the farm. The county judge is my fishing buddy. We'll have her in a state facility by Christmas." I turned off the phone. The church was so quiet I could hear the funeral home ceiling fan squeaking. Then Martha Higgins, 83 years old with a spine curved like a question mark, stood up in the 4th row. She lifted her cane and pointed it directly at Wade. "You sat in my Sunday school class when you were 7 years old, Wade Hollis. You stole the offering plate quarters and blamed it on the Henderson boy." Her voice shook, but not from weakness. "I should have caned you then. Lord forgive me for waiting 30 years. Wade's jaw worked like he was chewing something tough. This is ridiculous. That recording is doctored. She's been planning this for months. You all know Ida May, she's never been stable. Remember when she drove the tractor through the fence in '09? I drove that tractor through the fence, I said quietly, because your uncle was passed out drunk in the driver's seat with his foot on the accelerator. I climbed onto a moving vehicle to save his worthless life. Broke 2 ribs. He told everyone I'd gone hysterical and stolen his keys. Sheriff Thompson shifted his weight in the back row. He'd been the one who responded to that call. He'd seen Randy unconscious in the ditch, reeking of whiskey. He'd written the report. He'd buried it. I met his eyes now. Held them. You remember that night, Sheriff? He didn't answer. But he didn't look away either. And he didn't move to arrest me. The organist had stopped hyperventilating. She was crying instead. Silent tears tracking through her powder. Her name was Ellen. Her husband had left her for a waitress at the Waffle House 6 years ago. She'd told me once, in the church kitchen, that she still set the table for 2 every Sunday. Some ghosts take longer to bury than others. Now here's what's going to happen, I said. Wade is going to sit down. Linda is going to stop bleeding on my late husband's prayer card. And everyone else is going to listen while I explain exactly how this family tried to steal my land, my home, and my sanity, and why every single one of them failed. Wade didn't sit. He lunged. This time, he didn't grab for the phone. He grabbed for me. His hands closed around my throat, and I felt my spine hit the edge of the coffin. Randy's body shifted inside. The whole thing rocked on its stand. You crazy bitch. I brought my knee up. Hard. Wade folded like a lawn chair. The sound he made was high and thin, like air escaping a punctured tire. He crumpled onto the altar steps, clutching himself, his face purple for reasons that had nothing to do with wine. The church erupted. Uncle Bob, Randy's oldest brother, took a swing at me with his funeral program. Missed. Hit the flower arrangement instead. White lilies exploded everywhere. Aunt Linda started screaming something about desecration of a corpse. 2 of Wade's cousins vaulted over the front pew and came at me from both sides. I grabbed the microphone stand and swung it in a wide arc. The base caught one cousin in the stomach. The other one tripped over Wade's prone body and went down hard on the polished wood floor, skidding into the communion rail with a crack that sounded expensive. Sheriff, someone yelled. Do something. Sheriff Thompson stood with his arms crossed. His face had gone stony and unreadable. I am doing something, he said. I'm watching a woman defend herself in a house of God. Seems like exactly the right place for it. Martha Higgins cackled. Actually cackled. The sound bounced off the stained glass windows. That's it, Wade wheezed from the floor. I'm pressing charges. Assault. Desecration. Disturbing the peace. Defamation. She's going to prison. I looked down at him. His collar was soaked with wine and sweat. His carefully combed hair had come apart into greasy strands. He was 35 years old, and in that moment he looked exactly like the boy who'd stolen quarters from the offering plate. You'll press charges? I knelt beside him. Lowered my voice so only he could hear. Go ahead, Wade. I'll subpoena every text you've ever sent your lawyer. Every email about the tractor. Every voicemail you left your uncle threatening to handle the wife problem. You think I only recorded one conversation? His eyes went wide. I've been collecting evidence for 3 years, I whispered. Since the night I found the first forged signature. My signature on a loan application I'd never seen. Want to know what else I found? He shook his head. A tiny, frantic motion. Too bad. The whole town's about to find out. I stood up. Faced the congregation. 200 people stared back at me. Some horrified. Some fascinated. Some, I could see it in the way they leaned forward, the way their lips parted, hungry for more. Small towns breed small scandals. Affairs. DUIs. Gossip about who bought what and couldn't afford it. This was something else. This was a reckoning. 3 years ago, my husband took out a second mortgage on our farm. $300,000. He forged my signature. He used the money to buy a fishing boat, a timeshare in Florida, and a condo for my sister, my twin sister, in Nashville. The gasp that went through the church was less a sound and more a physical force. I felt it in my chest. Patty. Martha Higgins lowered her cane. He was with Patty? Since our 25th anniversary party. When I caught them in the coat room, Randy told me I was imagining things. Told me the stress of the farm was making me paranoid. Suggested I see a doctor. A psychiatrist. Told the same thing to anyone who'd listen. Poor Ida Mae. Change of life. You know how women get. I'd heard those words. Through closed doors. At church suppers. At the feed store. Poor Ida Mae. Unstable. Hysterical. Maybe she needs some rest. Maybe the farm's too much for her. He'd been laying the groundwork for years. Isolation, I said into the microphone. That's what abusers do. They isolate you. They make you doubt yourself. Then they make sure no one else believes you either. And when you're good and broken and alone, they take everything. Ellen the organist was sobbing openly now. Barb Jenkins had her arm around her. Sheriff Thompson had uncrossed his arms. His hands hung at his sides, and they were shaking. Only later would I learn that his sister had left her husband 3 months ago. Had shown up at his doorstep at 2 in the morning with a split lip and a toddler on her hip. Had whispered the same words. He said no one would believe me. But here's the thing about farm women, I said. We're patient. We have to be. You can't rush a harvest. You can't hurry a calf. So I waited. I documented. I recorded. I copied every file, every statement, every lie. I built a case so thorough it would make a prosecutor weep. I looked down at Wade. Then at Aunt Linda. At Uncle Bob. At every relative who'd sat in my kitchen, eaten my food, and known. And I gave a copy of everything to a lawyer in Nashville. Not Randy's lawyer. Not the county judge's fishing buddy. A real lawyer. A woman who specializes in financial abuse of spouses. If anything happens to me, a car accident, a fall, a tragic farm incident, every document goes public. Every recording gets released to the news stations in Nashville. Every dirty detail of what this family did gets aired like laundry on a Monday morning. Wade made a sound like a stepped-on cat. So go ahead, I said. Press charges. Tell the sheriff I assaulted you. I'll explain to the judge that I was defending myself from a man who just tried to strangle me in front of 200 witnesses. While my dead husband's body lay 3 feet away. At his funeral. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Think about how that'll play in court, Wade. Think real hard. He didn't answer. He just lay there on the altar steps, surrounded by crushed lilies, his ambitions bleeding out of him in a puddle of communion wine. Aunt Linda stepped forward. Her claw marks were still red and angry on my neck. Her mascara had run into long black streaks down her cheeks. She looked like a haunted doll. Ida Mae. Her voice trembled. Please. We can work this out. As a family. Family. I tasted the word like a piece of spoiled meat. Linda, you watched him gaslight me for 15 years. You sat at my Thanksgiving table and ate my cornbread dressing and told me I was blessed to have such a good man. You knew about Patty. You knew about the boat. You knew about the mortgage. And you said nothing. Her mouth opened and closed. Opened and closed. A fish on a dock. Get out of my sight, I said. All of you. Take Wade. Take your grief. Take your lies. And get out of my husband's funeral. They moved. Slowly at first. Then faster. Wade's cousins hauled him up by the armpits and dragged him down the side aisle, his feet bumping over every pew leg, his groans echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Aunt Linda stumbled after them, still clutching the prayer card. Uncle Bob tried to say something, thought better of it, and followed. The rest of the relatives filed out like a defeated parade. Heads down. Shoulders hunched. Avoiding eye contact with the congregation. When the last of them was gone, Martha Higgins walked up the center aisle. She moved slowly, her cane tapping out a rhythm on the floor. Step. Tap. Step. Tap. Step. She stopped at the altar. Reached up. And placed her gnarled hand on top of mine. You should have done this 10 years ago, she said. I know. But you did it now. Her eyes were watery but fierce. That counts for something. She turned and walked back to her pew. Sat down. Folded her hands in her lap like she was waiting for the service to resume. The organist was still crying. The sheriff was still standing in the back. The coffin was still open, Randy's waxy face still frozen in that mortician's approximation of peace. I looked at him for a long moment. You should have just divorced me, I said quietly. It would have been cheaper. He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. But somewhere in the church, someone laughed. It was a wet, shaky sound, half tears and half relief. Then someone else joined in. And someone else. Until the whole congregation was making that strange, healing noise, not laughter exactly, but something adjacent. Something that acknowledged how absurd it all was. A woman, a microphone, a dead man in a box, and 37 years of silence finally broken. Sheriff Thompson walked up the aisle. He stopped at my side. That lawyer in Nashville, he said. She any good? The best. He nodded slowly. Reached into his pocket. Pulled out a business card. My sister's going through something similar. Different scale. No farm. Just a trailer and 2 kids and a husband who thinks he owns them. I took the card. I'll make sure she gets a call. He nodded again. Then he did something unexpected. He reached up and straightened my torn dress collar. Gently. Almost fatherly. Covering the scratches on my neck. For what it's worth, he said, I'm sorry. About the report in '09. I should have told the truth. I didn't say it was okay. Because it wasn't. But I nodded. And that nod said more than forgiveness ever could. The funeral director had been hiding in the choir loft. I could see his bald head peeking over the railing. When I caught his eye, he ducked like a prairie dog into a hole. You can come down now, I called. The show's over. He emerged cautiously, clutching his funeral program binder like a shield. The burial, he stammered. We still need to do the burial. The cemetery workers are waiting at the plot, and the permit requires us to. Then let's bury him. I walked away from the altar. My legs felt strange. Hollow. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long that my body had forgotten how to move without it. I stopped at the church doors. Turned back. 200 faces looked at me. Waiting. Expectant. What do you say to a woman who just burned her entire life down in front of you? I said the only thing that felt true. Y'all coming to the graveside or not? I didn't pay for that hole just to make him comfortable. They came. Every single one of them. The procession stretched from the church to the cemetery like a dark river winding through the brown December fields. Cars I recognized. Trucks I'd seen at the feed store. Ellen the organist in her ancient Buick. Martha Higgins in the passenger seat of her grandson's pickup. Sheriff Thompson's patrol car bringing up the rear, lights off but presence unmistakable. I rode alone in the front seat of the hearse. The funeral director had offered to drive me. I'd told him I'd rather walk. We compromised on the hearse. The cemetery sat on a hill overlooking the Hollis family land. 3 generations buried there. Randy's father. His grandfather. A baby sister who'd died of fever in 1943. My stillborn son, marked by a stone so small you could miss it if you weren't looking. I hadn't been to that grave in 20 years. Randy had told me I was dwelling. That I needed to move on. That God's plan didn't include me crying over a baby who'd never drawn breath. So I'd stopped going. And he'd won that battle. The hearse stopped. The funeral director opened my door. I stepped out into the thin winter sunshine and felt the cold wind cut through my torn dress. The whole was waiting. The relatives were not. Their cars were gone from the parking area. Probably regrouping at Linda's house, plotting their next move, calling lawyers, trying to figure out how to salvage what was left of their inheritance. Let them. I had something they didn't. The truth. And a lawyer in Nashville who knew what to do with it. The pastor, the one I'd shoved off the pulpit, approached me carefully. He was young. New to the congregation. He'd only been at First Baptist for 6 months, and in that time he'd mostly avoided me. I couldn't blame him. I hadn't exactly been welcoming. Sister Hollis. His voice cracked on my name. I understand if you'd prefer I not officiate. Given the circumstances. But the cemetery requires a licensed minister too. You're fine. I waved him off. Go ahead. Say the words. Just skip the part about faithful husband. He swallowed hard. Nodded. The crowd gathered around the grave. 200 people in a semicircle on a hilltop, their breath steaming in the cold air. The casket sat on the lowering device, suspended over the hole. Randy's face was still visible through the half-open lid. I walked to the head of the grave. Stood where the widow was supposed to stand. Then I reached down and closed the lid myself. The latch clicked shut. The pastor began. His voice was thin and nervous, but the words were old and solid. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies. I stopped listening. I was looking at the small headstone. 10 yards away. Half hidden by dead grass. Baby boy Hollis. March 12, 1989. Safely home. My throat closed up. Don't cry. Don't you dare cry. You've come too far to break down now. But the tears came anyway. Not the raging, screaming tears from the church. These were different. Quieter. Older. Tears that had been waiting 30 years to fall. A hand slipped into mine. I looked down. Martha Higgins. She'd left her grandson and walked through the frozen grass with her cane, and now she stood beside me, her bones frail against my arm. I buried 2 babies, she said quietly. Before my Harold. Before my grandbabies. I know that stone. I couldn't speak. You don't have to say anything. Just stand there and breathe. So I stood there. And I breathed. And I let the tears come. The pastor finished. The casket began its mechanical descent into the ground. The crowd started to disperse, pressing my hand, murmuring words I didn't process. Barb Jenkins, you're stronger than any of us knew. Ellen the organist, call me. When this is over. We'll have coffee. Sheriff Thompson, I'll be by tomorrow. We need to talk about the protective order. And then they were gone. All of them. Even Martha, who squeezed my hand one last time and hobbled back to her grandson's truck. I stood alone on the hilltop. The grave workers were shoveling dirt into the hole. The sound was rhythmic. Almost peaceful. Thump. Scrape. Thump. Scrape. I walked to my son's grave. Kneeled in the frozen grass. Traced the letters of his stone with my finger. I'm sorry I stopped coming, I whispered. I didn't know how to fight him yet. I'm learning now. The wind picked up, rattled the dead grass, made the bare branches of the cemetery oaks creak and groan. And somewhere in that sound, I imagined I heard an answer. Not words. Just a feeling. A loosening in my chest, like a knot that had been pulled too tight for too long was finally starting to give. I stayed there until the grave workers finished. Until the sun started to sink behind the tree line. Until my fingers went numb and my knees ached from the cold ground. Then I stood up, brushed the dirt off my funeral dress, and walked back to the hearse. The funeral director was waiting. He'd waited the whole time. Where to, Mrs. Hollis? I thought about it. The farmhouse was empty. The relatives were gone. The dishes from the sympathy casseroles were still stacked in the kitchen. The refrigerator was full of food I hadn't bought and wouldn't eat. Take me home, I said. He did. The farm looked different in the dusk. The barn. The silo. The long white fence that Randy had never fixed, the one I'd been meaning to mend for 3 summers. The porch light was off. I'd forgotten to leave it on. I'd been a little distracted. I thanked the funeral director. Walked up the porch steps. Unlocked the door with the key I'd had since I was 21 years old and believed in love and forever and all the other lies they sell you at bridal showers. The house was quiet. My house now. Just mine. I went to the kitchen. Poured myself a glass of sweet tea from the pitcher in the fridge. Sat down at the table where I'd served Randy dinner for 37 years. And for the first time since I'd grabbed that microphone, I let myself think about what I'd done. I'd ended a 30-year conspiracy in front of the whole town. I'd publicly humiliated the most powerful family in the county. I'd probably made myself a target. And I'd done it all while wearing a Goodwill dress and a pair of shoes that pinched my feet. I started laughing. It wasn't the shaky, almost laughter from the church. This was real. Deep. The kind of laughter that comes from someplace primitive, someplace that doesn't care about dignity or propriety or what the neighbors might think. I laughed until my ribs hurt. Until my tea sloshed over the rim of the glass. Until I had to put my head down on the table and gasp for breath. When I finally stopped, I felt lighter than I had in decades. Then my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. You don't know me. I was at the funeral. My husband's been doing the same thing for 12 years. Financial stuff. Emotional stuff. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was alone. Can you help me? I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed my reply. Come over tomorrow. Bring your documents. I'll put the coffee on. I hit send. Outside the kitchen window, the last light faded from the sky. The farm settled into darkness. The cows lowed softly in the barn, waiting to be milked. I'd been up since 4 that morning. I'd fought a roomful of people. I'd buried my husband. I'd visited my son's grave. I should have been exhausted. But I felt more awake than I had in 37 years. I stood up. Put my glass in the sink. Walked to the front door and flipped on the porch light. Let them come. The lawyers. The relatives. The gossips. The threats. This was my house now. And I was done hiding. The next morning, the coffee was cold and the driveway was full of pickup trucks I didn't recognize. I stood at the kitchen window at 6:15, still in my robe, watching them pull in one by one. Rusty Fords. Mud-caked Chevys. A Dodge with a gun rack and a bumper sticker that said Jesus is my co-pilot, but my wife controls the radio. Farm women. I knew them before they knocked. You could tell by the way they walked. Shoulders braced. Eyes scanning. Hands shoved deep in jacket pockets like they were holding on to something invisible. 7 of them. 8. 9. By 6:30 there were 11 trucks parked in my yard, and 11 women standing on my porch, and not a single one of them was holding a casserole dish. I opened the door. You the one who played the recording? The woman in front was 50-ish, square-jawed, wearing a John Deere cap pulled low. Her knuckles were scraped raw. Mechanic's hands. Or maybe a welder's. I'm the one. She studied my face. The scratches on my neck. The bruise blooming along my collarbone where Aunt Linda's nails had dug in. Good, she said. I'm Doreen. My husband's been hiding money in a hunting cabin deed for 8 years. I found the papers last March. He told me I was too stupid to understand legal documents. She pulled a manila folder from her jacket. Turns out I'm not. The woman behind her stepped forward. Younger. 30s. Holding a baby on her hip and a shoebox under her arm. My name's Crystal. My father-in-law took out a life insurance policy on me. I found it in his filing cabinet when he was in the hospital. He's not sick anymore, and he keeps asking me to go hunting with him. She shifted the baby to her other hip. I don't hunt. One by one, they introduced themselves. Gave me their folders. Their shoeboxes. Their Ziploc bags stuffed with bank statements and threatening voicemails and letters from lawyers they couldn't afford. 11 women. 11 stories. Same thread running through all of them like a seam. He told me I was crazy. He told me no one would believe me. He told me I'd lose everything if I left. I looked at the pile of evidence on my kitchen table. I'm going to need more coffee. Doreen laughed. It was a hard, barking sound. I brought whiskey. It's 7 in the morning. I know. I've been up since 4. She pulled a flask from her jacket and set it next to the sugar bowl. Nobody touched it. But knowing it was there helped. We worked all morning. Spread the documents across every flat surface in the kitchen. Counter. Stove. Top of the refrigerator. Crystal's baby slept in a laundry basket lined with dish towels while we cross-referenced bank accounts and property records and found patterns. Same notary public on 6 of the fraudulent loan documents. Same lawyer, Wade's fishing buddy, representing 4 of the husbands. Same county judge approving the questionable guardianship petitions. It's a network, I said, staring at the names written in my spiral notebook. They've been working together for years. Isolate the wife. Discredit her. Take everything. Doreen pointed at the lawyer's name. That's Derek Powell. He handled my prenup. Told me it was standard. Told me not to worry my pretty little head about it. Did you read it? My pretty little head was 22 years old and in love. Her jaw tightened. I read it now. The back door creaked open. Every woman in the kitchen went silent. Doreen's hand moved toward her hip like she was reaching for something that wasn't there. Crystal grabbed the baby out of the laundry basket. Danny Puckett stood in the doorway, frozen like a deer in headlights. His face went red. Then white. Then red again. Mrs. Hollis. I didn't know you had CC company. He was 19 years old, 6'2", built like a scarecrow, with a stutter that got worse every time he was nervous. He'd been working on the farm since he was 15. Randy had hired him because he was cheap. I'd kept him because he showed up on time and never complained about the cold. Danny. I set down my pen. These are friends. They're leaving soon. He nodded, still frozen. Just came to milk the cows. The be-back barn. IW won't bother you. You're not a bother, Danny. You've never been a bother. Something flickered across his face. Something quick and pained. Then he ducked his head and disappeared toward the barn. Doreen watched him go. That boy know something? What makes you say that? The way he looked at you. Like he wanted to say something and couldn't. I thought about it. Danny had been around for 4 years. Quiet. Reliable. Always in the background. Randy had barely acknowledged his existence. Wade had called him the retard once, and Danny had flinched like he'd been hit. I don't know, I said. He's just a farmhand. Farmhands hear things. Doreen's eyes were hard. So do wives. We just pretend we don't. By noon, we had a plan. Not a legal strategy, that was for my Nashville lawyer. This was something else. This was a support network. Phone numbers exchanged. Emergency codes established. A promise that if any one of their husbands got violent, the other 10 would show up within 15 minutes with witnesses and cameras and the kind of fearlessness that only comes from having nothing left to lose. We need a name, Crystal said. Something they'll remember. The Farm Wives Union, someone suggested. The Hen House. The Marriage Witness Protection Program. Doreen shook her head. No. Something simpler. Something that tells them exactly what we are. She looked at me. What are we? I thought about the funeral. The microphone. The way 200 people had gasped when they heard Randy's voice. The way Martha Higgins had lifted her cane. The way Sheriff Thompson had stood in the back and done nothing while Wade tried to strangle me. Witnesses, I said. We're witnesses. To each other's lives. To each other's truth. Doreen smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. The witnesses. I like it. They left in shifts. 2 by 2, so the neighbors wouldn't talk. By 2 o'clock, the last truck had pulled out of my driveway, and the kitchen was quiet again. I stood at the sink, washing coffee mugs, when Danny came back from the barn. He stopped at the kitchen door. Didn't come in. Just stood there with his boots on the threshold, turning his cap around and around in his hands. And Mrs. Hollis. I turned off the water. What is it, Danny? He swallowed. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down. I heard something. That night. The night Mr. Hollis died. The dish towel slipped from my hands. What night? The night his tractor rolled. IW was in the equipment shed. Fixing the baler. He didn't know I was there. My heart was beating too fast. I could feel it in my throat. In my temples. In the bruises on my neck. What did you hear, Danny? He looked at the floor. At the ceiling. At the refrigerator. Anywhere but at me. He was arguing. With W. Wade. About the W. Will. About you. Wade said. He stopped. Pressed his lips together. Took a breath. Wade said, she's not signing. We need another WA. And Mr. Hollis said, I'll handle item A. I've been handling her for 30 years. The kitchen tilted. And then? Then W. Wade said. Danny's voice dropped to a whisper. The T-tractor. The drainage ditch. It'd look like an accident. Nobody would question it. His eyes finally met mine. They were wet. Mr. Hollis laughed. He said, UW watched too many movies. But he didn't say no. He didn't say no, Mrs. Hollis. I sat down. Not because I wanted to. Because my legs stopped working. Danny stayed in the doorway, wringing his cap like he was trying to strangle it. ISH should be told someone. ISH should be told the SH sheriff. But I was scared. Wade said he'd have me deported. My mom's undocumented. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He was crying now. Silently. The way boys cry when they've been taught that tears are weakness and weakness gets you beaten. I stood up. Walked to the door. Put my hands on his shoulders. He flinched. Danny. He wouldn't look at me. Danny, look at me. He looked. His face was blotchy and swollen and so young it made my chest hurt. You're telling me now. That's what matters. You're telling me now. I'm a sea coward. No. I shook my head. A coward would have taken this secret to his grave. You didn't. You told me. That makes you braver than every man in that church yesterday. He wiped his nose on his sleeve. What are you going to do? I thought about the kitchen table. The documents. The notary's name. The lawyer. The judge. The network of men who'd built their fortunes on the silence of women. I'm going to finish my coffee, I said. Then I'm going to call my lawyer in Nashville. Then I'm going to call Sheriff Thompson. And then, I looked at the pile of evidence on my kitchen counter. Then I'm going to burn it all down. Danny almost smiled. See, can I help? You already have. That night, I sat alone in the living room for the first time in 37 years. Not alone in the house. I'd been alone in the house plenty of times when Randy was out doing whatever Randy did. But alone in the living room. The good room. The room with the velvet couch and the china cabinet and the family Bible on the coffee table that no one was allowed to touch. Randy had called it his sanctuary. His throne room. He'd sit in the recliner, the one with the worn spot on the armrest from his elbow, and hold court. Dispense wisdom. Pass judgment. The relatives would gather around him like disciples, nodding at everything he said, and I would stand in the doorway, holding a tray of cheese and crackers, invisible. I sat in the recliner now. It was more comfortable than I expected. The family Bible was still on the coffee table. I picked it up. Opened it to the front page where the family tree was written in fading ink. Hollis's going back to 1842. Generations of men who'd worked this land and passed it down to their sons. My name was there. Written in Randy's cramped handwriting. Ida Mae Carson Hollis. Married June 14, 1986. And below it, a single line. A single name. Baby boy Hollis. Born and died March 12, 1989. No one had written stillborn. No one had written son. Just a name and two dates, like a receipt. Like proof of purchase. I closed the Bible. Then I opened it again. And I crossed out Randy's name. Just a single line of black ink. Clean. Decisive. Through the letters of his name like a judge striking a conviction from the record. It felt better than the whiskey would have. My phone rang at 9:30. Nashville area code. My lawyer. I saw the news, she said. No hello. No how are you? Just straight to business. Claire Burnett was 58 years old, had been practicing family law and financial litigation for 30 years, and had never lost a case. She was also the only person I'd ever met who could make a pantsuit look intimidating. Channel 4 ran a segment on the funeral incident. Widow disrupts husband's service with shocking accusations. You're famous, Ida Mae. I was going for infamous. You achieved both. Listen, the exposure is good. It's harder for them to make you disappear if everyone's watching. Papers rustled on her end. I've been going through the files you sent. The mortgage documents. The boat title. The condo deed. It's worse than we thought. Tell me something I don't know. Randy didn't just forge your signature. He forged your notarization. Used a notary public named Harold Kemp, I finished. He notarized 6 of the fraudulent documents from the other women who were here today. Same stamp. Same signature. Same everything. A pause. Other women? I told her about Doreen. Crystal. The 11 trucks. The witnesses. Claire was silent for a long moment. Then she laughed. It was a sharp, delighted sound. Ida Mae, do you understand what you've done? You've uncovered a coordinated financial abuse ring operating across 3 counties. Harold Kemp. Derek Powell. Judge Thornton. These are public officials. Elected officials. If we can prove conspiracy, we can. Danny heard Wade and Randy arguing the night Randy died. Wade suggested the tractor. Suggested it would look like an accident. Randy didn't say no. Another pause. Longer this time. Is Danny willing to testify? I looked out the window. The barn light was still on. Danny was still out there, probably still working, probably still turning his cap around in his hands. He's scared. His mom's undocumented. Wade threatened to have her deported. I can get her protected status. Witness protection for undocumented immigrants in felony conspiracy cases. There's a process. It's not fast, but it works. He'll want to know she's safe first. Then we make her safe first. Claire's voice was iron. I've got a colleague in immigration law. We'll fast-track it. In the meantime, don't leave the farm. Don't go anywhere alone. And for God's sake, don't answer the door unless you know who's on the other side. I haven't been answering the door for 30 years. I just finally stopped pretending I wasn't home. Claire laughed again. I like you, Ida May. Most of my clients cry in my office. You're out here burning down a county. The crying came later. It always does. Her voice softened. Just for a moment. It always does. I hung up and sat in the dark living room, in Randy's chair, holding the family Bible with his name crossed out. The house creaked around me. Old houses always creak. But I knew every sound this house could make. The pop of the water heater. The groan of the floorboards when the temperature dropped. The rattle of the kitchen window when the wind came from the east. This wasn't any of those. This was the front porch. This was footsteps. I stood up. Walked to the window. Pulled back the curtain just enough to see. A truck idled at the end of my driveway. Headlights off. Engine running. A dark shape behind the wheel. Not a truck I recognized. It sat there for 5 minutes. 10. 15. Long enough for me to memorize the shape of its silhouette. Long enough for me to call Sheriff Thompson and whisper into the phone. I see it, he said. I'm 2 minutes out. Stay inside. Wasn't planning on taking a stroll. He hung up. The truck stayed. Then, slowly, it pulled away. Taillights flaring red in the darkness. Turning left onto the county road. Disappearing over the hill. Sheriff Thompson's patrol car rolled up 3 minutes later. He walked the perimeter with a flashlight. Checked the barn. The equipment shed. The drainage ditch where Randy had died. He came back to the porch. I opened the door. Tire tracks, he said. Fresh ones. Whoever it was, they sat there long enough to leave an impression. Literally. Wade? Probably. Or one of his cousins. Or someone they hired. He rubbed the back of his neck. I can't arrest anyone for sitting in a truck on a public road. But I can increase patrols. And I can recommend you get a dog. A big one. I've got cows. Cows don't bark. Fair point. He turned to leave. Stopped. Turned back. That thing Danny told you. About the tractor. You need to get it on record. Officially. Soon. I know. Tomorrow. Not next week. Tomorrow. Before Wade figures out what Danny knows. I watched his taillights disappear down the driveway, the same path the stranger's truck had taken. Then I went inside, locked every door, and sat in the kitchen with the lights off and a cast-iron skillet in my lap. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear. From clarity. For 37 years, I'd been afraid of the wrong things. Afraid of displeasing Randy. Afraid of what the neighbors would think. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of starting over. Afraid of being the crazy one, the difficult one, the wife who couldn't keep her man happy. But the thing about being afraid for that long is that fear stops feeling like fear. It starts feeling like normal. Like gravity. Like something so fundamental you forget it's there until it's gone. And sitting in that dark kitchen, with a skillet in my lap and a dead husband in the ground and 11 women's evidence stacked on my counter, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. Not the hot, reckless anger of the funeral. This was something colder. Deeper. An anger that had been simmering for decades, waiting for permission to boil. Wade wanted a war. Fine. He had no idea who he was fighting. 3 days later, the story broke. Not in the local paper, the county judge was Wade's fishing buddy, and the editor owed Derek Powell $2,000 from a poker game. No, this was the Tennessean. Nashville's biggest paper. Front page of the Sunday edition. Network of fraud, how 3 counties' public officials allegedly conspired to defraud farm wives out of millions. Claire had worked fast. And she hadn't just used my evidence. She'd found more. 6 more women. 18 more fraudulent documents. A pattern of abuse stretching back 15 years, all connected to the same notary, the same lawyer, the same judge. The article quoted me by name. Ida Mae Hollis, 58, whose revelation at her husband's funeral last week first brought the scheme to light. It also quoted Wade. These accusations are completely false and the desperate acts of a grieving woman who has never been mentally stable. My uncle loved his wife deeply. We will be pursuing all legal options to clear our family's name. I read that part 3 times. Then I laughed until I couldn't breathe. Grieving woman. He'd used those exact words in his recorded conversation with Randy. Grieving widow, unstable, unfit to manage the farm. Same script. Same playbook. He wasn't even being original. The phone rang. Doreen. You see the article? I'm looking at it now. My husband read it at breakfast. Turned white as a sheet. Got up from the table and left without finishing his eggs. Hasn't come back. Where'd he go? Derek Powell's office, probably. Or Judge Thornton's. Or straight to hell. I don't care anymore. Her voice cracked. I don't care, Ida Mae. I thought I would. I thought I'd be scared. But I'm not. Neither am I. Is that weird? To not be scared when you probably should be? I thought about the dark kitchen. The cast iron skillet. The truck idling at the end of the driveway. No, I said. I think it's called being done. The church service that Sunday was the fullest it had been in years. Not because people wanted to worship. Because people wanted to see what would happen. I walked in 5 minutes late. Deliberately. Let every head turn. Let every whisper start. I was wearing my Sunday dress, not the funeral dress, a different one, blue with white buttons, one I'd bought for myself at a real store 2 years ago and never worn because Randy said it made me look trying too hard. He was dead. I could try as hard as I wanted. Martha Higgins saved me a seat in the 4th row. Right next to her. In the section where the Hollis relatives used to sit. They weren't there anymore. Wade and Linda and Uncle Bob and the rest of them had moved to the Baptist church in the next town over. According to the gossip chain, they'd told the pastor there that they were fleeing persecution. The young pastor, the one I'd shoved off the pulpit, looked at me when I walked in. Swallowed hard. Then he did something I didn't expect. He smiled. Not a nervous smile. A real one. The kind that reaches your eyes. Before we begin today's service, he said, I'd like to say something. The congregation went silent. I've been at First Baptist for 6 months. In that time, I've watched this community struggle with something difficult. Something ugly. Something that didn't happen in the shadows, but right in front of us. And we looked away. He paused. Gripped the pulpit. We looked away because it was easier. Because the people involved were powerful. Because we told ourselves it wasn't our business. But Scripture says, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. It doesn't say, speak up only when it's convenient. It doesn't say, speak up only when the powerful won't get mad. It says speak up. He looked directly at me. Sister Hollis spoke up. She spoke up in this very room, in a way that made some of us uncomfortable. But discomfort is not persecution. Discomfort is just the feeling of a callus being removed. It hurts because the skin underneath is still tender. It hurts because healing hurts. Martha Higgins reached over and took my hand. I'm not going to pretend I understand everything that's happened, the pastor said. I'm not going to pretend I have answers. But I know this, when someone has been silenced for 37 years and finally finds their voice, the church's job is not to tell them to be quiet. The church's job is to listen. He stepped back from the pulpit. Now let's pray. And if anyone here has something they need to confess, about what they saw and ignored, about what they suspected and buried, the altar is open. No one moved for a long moment. Then Ellen the organist stood up. Walked to the altar. Knelt down. Her shoulders were shaking. Then Barb Jenkins. Then Sheriff Thompson, still in his uniform, his hat in his hands. Then a dozen more. 24. People I'd known my whole life. People who'd eaten at my table and complimented my cooking and never once asked me if I was okay. They knelt at the altar and cried. And I sat in the fourth row, holding Martha's hand, watching it all happen. I didn't cry. I'd done my crying at the cemetery. At my son's grave. In the dark kitchen with the skillet in my lap. But I felt something shift in my chest. Something that had been locked up tight for 37 years. Forgiveness wasn't the right word. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But something adjacent to it. Something that felt like the first good breath after a long sickness. After the service, the pastor met me at the door. I should have done that sooner, he said. You did it now. Does that count? I looked at the altar. Empty now. But the wood was still wet with tears. I'm starting to think it's the only thing that counts. I walked out into the January sunshine. The parking lot was full of people who didn't know what to say to me. So they said nothing. Just nodded. Touched my arm. Let me pass. Danny was waiting by my truck. He'd come to church for the first time in 4 years. Wearing a button-down shirt that didn't quite fit. Hair combed. Cap still in his hands. Ready? I asked. He nodded. Already. We drove to the sheriff's station in silence. Parked. Walked inside. Sheriff Thompson was already there, waiting with a tape recorder and a notepad and a look on his face that said he'd been waiting for this conversation for a long time. Danny sat down. Put his cap on the table. Took a breath. And told the truth. Every word of it. When he was done, Sheriff Thompson turned off the recorder and sat back in his chair. That's enough, he said quietly. That's enough to open a formal investigation. Into Wade Hollis. Into the death of Randy Hollis. Into everything. What happens now? I asked. He looked at Danny. Then at me. Now we find out if the system works. And if it doesn't, he stood up. Put on his hat. Then we make it work. I walked out of the station and stood on the steps, letting the cold air fill my lungs. The farm was waiting. The cows needed milking. The fence still needed mending. The porch light still needed a new bulb. But for the first time in 37 years, the work felt like mine. Not his. Not theirs. Mine. And that was enough. The arrest happened on a Thursday, 6 days after the funeral, on a morning so cold the cow's breath froze in the air before it reached the ground. I was in the barn when the patrol cars pulled up. 3 of them. No sirens. No lights. Just the slow, deliberate crunch of tires on frozen gravel. Sheriff Thompson stepped out first. Then 2 deputies I didn't recognize, both with their hands resting on their belts. Wade was at his house, the old Hollis family place half a mile down the road. The one Randy had let him live in rent-free for 12 years because family takes care of family. Sheriff Thompson walked over to me. His breath made white plumes in the cold air. "We've got the warrant. Thought you'd want to know." "I want to watch." Item A. I've been waiting 37 years to watch something like this. Don't make me wait 37 more. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Stay in the truck. Don't get out unless I tell you to. And for God's sake, don't bring a microphone." I almost smiled. No promises on the last one. We drove down the road in his patrol car. The heater was broken. Or maybe he just didn't turn it on. The cold kept me sharp. Wade's house was a squat brick ranch with a dead lawn and a satellite dish bolted to the roof. The curtains were drawn. The garage was open, and inside I could see his truck, the same dark shape I'd watched from my window that night. Sheriff Thompson walked up to the front door. The deputies flanked him. I stayed in the car, my breath fogging the window. Knock. 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 The door opened. Wade stood there in a bathrobe and slippers, holding a coffee mug that said "World's Best Uncle." He looked past the sheriff, past the deputies, and saw me in the patrol car. His face did something complicated. Surprise. Rage. Fear. All three, one after the other, like a slot machine landing on disaster. "Wade Hollis, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, forgery, and witness intimidation." "That's ridiculous. Derek's already filed a motion to." Sheriff Thompson kept reading him his rights. Wade kept talking. Neither of them was listening to the other. Then the handcuffs came out. Wade's coffee mug shattered on the concrete step. He started shouting about lawyers and wrongful arrest and how his uncle would be ashamed of all of us. "Your uncle's dead, Wade," Sheriff Thompson said. "And we're reopening the investigation into how he died." Wade's face went white. Actually white. Like every drop of blood had drained out of him and pooled somewhere in his feet. "That wasn't me. That was an accident," the coroner said. "The coroner is being re-interviewed tomorrow morning. Turns out he's got some questions about the original report. Something about tractor maintenance records that didn't exist until after the accident." Wade stopped struggling. The deputies put him in the back of the second patrol car. As they drove past me, he turned his head and looked straight through the window. His lips moved. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I'd seen that look before. It was the same look Randy gave me the night I told him I knew about Patty. The night he'd laughed and said, "Who's going to believe you?" I rolled down the window. "Wade," I called. He turned. His face was pressed against the glass like a fish in an aquarium. "I recorded that too." The patrol car pulled away. I sat in Sheriff Thompson's freezing vehicle for another 10 minutes, just breathing. Derek Powell was arrested the same afternoon. Judge Thornton resigned by 5 o'clock, citing health reasons. Harold Kemp, the notary, turned himself in at 7, carrying a briefcase full of documents and a written confession that named 17 other people. The house of cards collapsed that fast. Claire called me at 9 that night. She sounded tired but satisfied. The way a surgeon sounds after a long operation. Wade's being held without bail. Flight risk. The prosecutor's adding charges as we speak. Derek's already trying to cut a deal. By Monday, we'll have enough testimony to put this whole network away for 20 years. And the women? Doreen? Crystal? The others? They'll get their assets unfrozen. The fraudulent loans will be voided. It won't undo everything, but it's a start. It's more than we had last week. It's more than you had for 37 years. Claire paused. How are you doing? Really? I looked around my kitchen. The same table where I'd spread all those documents. The same chair where I'd sat with a cast-iron skillet in my lap. The same window where I'd watched the stranger's truck idling in the dark. "I'm still here," I said. "That counts for something. It counts for everything." The trial was set for March. Wade's lawyer, a new one, not Derek Powell, someone from Knoxville who specialized in lost causes, filed motion after motion. Change of venue. Suppression of evidence. Claims of prosecutorial misconduct. Every legal trick in the book. Claire batted them away one by one. "He's stalling," she told me. "Hoping the witnesses will lose their nerve. Hoping you'll get tired and drop the charges. I've been tired for 37 years. It's never stopped me before." She laughed. "I'm putting you on the stand first. You're my strongest witness. I've never testified in court. You've been testifying your whole life, Ida Mae. This is just the first time someone's writing it down." The morning of the trial, I put on the blue dress with the white buttons. The one I'd bought for myself. The one Randy had hated. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, looking at the woman staring back at me. She was 58 years old. Her hands were rough from decades of farm work. Her face was lined from decades of worry. Her eyes were tired, but they were clear. And her ring finger was bare. I'd taken off the wedding band the night after the funeral. Dropped it in the back of my jewelry box, next to a pair of earrings my mother had given me and a bracelet my son would never wear. I hadn't looked at it since. I didn't miss it. The courtroom was packed. Every pew full. Reporters from Nashville. Curious townspeople. The 11 women from my kitchen, sitting together in the second row like a jury before the jury. Doreen wore her John Deere cap. Crystal held her baby. They'd all worn blue. They hadn't coordinated it. It just happened that way. Martha Higgins sat in the front row with a cane across her knees and a look on her face that said she'd waited 83 years to see justice done and wasn't about to miss it now. Wade sat at the defense table in a suit that didn't fit him anymore. He'd lost weight in jail. His face was pale and puffy at the same time, the way dough looks before you bake it. He wouldn't look at me. That was fine. I looked at him enough for both of us. The bailiff called the court to order. The judge, not Thornton, a woman from Nashville with steel gray hair and a reputation for taking exactly zero nonsense, settled into her chair. The prosecutor made his opening statement. Wade's lawyer made his. Then Claire stood up and said the words I'd been waiting to hear. "The prosecution calls Ida Mae Hollis to the stand." I walked up the aisle. Past the reporters. Past the women in blue. Past Martha, who reached out and touched my arm as I passed. Her fingers were light as bird bones. I sat in the witness chair. Put my hand on the Bible. Swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor approached. He was young, maybe 35, with the kind of earnest face that made you want to trust him. "Mrs. Hollis, can you describe your marriage to the deceased, Randy Hollis?" I took a breath. "Objection," Wade's lawyer said. "Relevance." "Overruled," the judge said. "The witness may answer." I looked at the jury. 12 people from 3 counties. Some of them farm people. Some of them town people. All of them watching me with the same expression. Curiosity. Skepticism. Hope. "My marriage," I said, "was a 37-year lie. Randy Hollis was charming in public and cruel in private. He controlled the money. He controlled the farm. He controlled me. When I caught him with my sister, he told me I was crazy. When I found the forged signatures, he told me I was confused. When I threatened to leave, he told me no one would believe me." "And did you believe him?" "For a long time. Yes. I believed him." "What changed?" I looked at the prosecutor. Then at Claire. Then at the women in the second row. 5 days after my spine surgery, he brought 12 relatives to our house and told me to cook for them. I couldn't stand up without a walker. I had drains still stitched into my back. And he handed me a grocery list. I paused. Something broke. Not my spine. That was already broken. Something else. Something that had been bending for 37 years and finally decided it was done. Objection. Narrative. Overruled. Continue, Mrs. Hollis. I told them about the recordings. About the hidden documents. About Danny's testimony. About the 11 women and their shoeboxes full of evidence. I told them about the stranger's truck at the end of the driveway. About Wade's hands around my throat. About the words he'd spoken the night Randy died. The tractor. The drainage ditch. It had looked like an accident. Nobody would question it. The courtroom was silent. The prosecutor stepped back. No further questions. Wade's lawyer stood up. He was older than the prosecutor, with the kind of practiced sympathy that makes your skin crawl. Mrs. Hollis, you've described yourself as a victim of decades of abuse. But isn't it true that you never once filed a police report? No. I didn't. Never went to a shelter? No. Never told your pastor, your doctor, or your neighbors? No. So for 37 years, you told no one. And now, after your husband's death, when he can't defend himself, you expect this jury to believe your word alone? I looked at him for a long moment. He was good at this. He'd done it before. He knew how to make a woman sound crazy. But I wasn't crazy. I was just done being quiet. Sir, I said, do you know what happens to a woman who reports her husband in a town like this? She loses her church. She loses her friends. She loses her reputation. She gets called hysterical. Unstable. Vindictive. If she's lucky, she loses everything except her life. If she's not lucky, I paused. Randy's tractor didn't roll itself into that ditch. The lawyer's jaw tightened. You're implying that the defendant murdered his uncle. Do you have any evidence of that beyond hearsay? I have Danny Puckett's sworn testimony. I have the recording of Randy and Wade discussing my instability. I have the tractor maintenance records that were falsified after the accident. I leaned forward. And I have the word of 11 other women who were victimized by the same network of men your client was part of. Is that enough evidence for you, or should I keep going? The lawyer opened his mouth. Closed it. Looked at the judge. No further questions, Your Honor. Wade's face had gone gray. The jury was staring at him now, not at me. I stepped down from the stand. Walked back to my seat. Doreen reached out and squeezed my hand. Crystal was crying. Martha Higgins nodded at me, slow and deliberate, the way you nod at someone who's just done exactly what you expected them to do. Danny testified next. His stutter was worse on the stand. His hands shook. He had to stop twice to drink water and catch his breath. But he told the truth. Every word of it. And when Wade's lawyer tried to discredit him, isn't it true you have a learning disability? Danny looked him straight in the eye. Why yes, sir. I have a ST stutter. It doesn't mean I'm deaf. The jury smiled. The lawyer didn't. After Danny came the coroner. Then the notary, Harold Kemp, who'd flipped on everyone. Then 3 of the 11 women. Then a forensic accountant who'd traced the fraudulent loans back 15 years. By the time the prosecution rested, Wade's lawyer looked like a man who'd just realized he'd brought a fly swatter to a gunfight. The defense called one witness. Wade. He walked to the stand with his shoulders back and his chin up, the way he'd walked into church every Sunday. The way he'd walked into my kitchen every Thanksgiving. The way men like him always walked when they thought they were still in control. His lawyer asked him soft questions. Easy ones. Questions designed to make him look human. Did you love your uncle, Mr. Hollis? Very much. He was like a father to me. Did you have anything to do with his death? Absolutely not. That's a terrible lie. I loved Uncle Randy. Did you conspire to defraud Mrs. Hollis or any of the other women who've testified? Never. I respected my aunt. I still do, despite everything. Grief can make people say things they don't mean. I almost laughed out loud. Grief. He was still using the same script. Then the prosecutor stood up for cross-examination. Mr. Hollis, you testified that you respected your aunt. Is that correct? Yes, sir. Then can you explain this recording? He pressed a button. The courtroom speakers crackled. And Wade's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. She's not signing. We need another way. Then Randy's voice. I'll handle Ida Mae. I've been handling her for 30 years. Then Wade again. The tractor. The drainage ditch. It'd look like an accident. Nobody would question it. The recording played to the end. Every word. Every pause. Every damning syllable. The prosecutor let the silence hang for a full 10 seconds. Mr. Hollis. Did you respect your aunt when you suggested making her a widow? Wade's mouth opened and closed. Opened and closed. A fish on a dock. I was upset. I didn't mean it. It was just talk. Just talk. The way your uncle's tractor accident was just an accident. The way the forged signatures were just paperwork. The way the threats to have Mrs. Hollis institutionalized were just family concern. The prosecutor stepped closer. At what point, Mr. Hollis, does just talk become conspiracy to commit murder? I want a lawyer. I'm not answering any more questions. Your lawyer is sitting right there, and he's not objecting. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Hollis, you've been asked a question. Please answer. Wade looked at his lawyer. His lawyer looked at the floor. No further questions, the prosecutor said. The jury was out for 4 hours. I sat in the hallway on a wooden bench, drinking terrible vending machine coffee, watching the winter light move across the floor. Doreen sat beside me. Crystal paced with her baby. Danny sat on the floor with his back against the wall, turning his cap around in his hands. Martha Higgins had fallen asleep in her chair. At 5:17, the bailiff announced that the jury had reached a verdict. We filed back into the courtroom. The reporters raised their cameras. The women in blue held hands. Wade stood at the defense table, and for the first time since the trial began, he looked genuinely afraid. The foreman stood. Unfolded a piece of paper. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. A sound went through the courtroom. Not a gasp. Not a cheer. Something in between. Something that felt like air rushing out of a room that had been pressurized for too long. On the charge of financial fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of forgery, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of witness intimidation, we find the defendant guilty. 12 charges. 12 guilty verdicts. The foreman read every one of them, and with each word, Wade's body seemed to shrink into itself. His shoulders slumped. His chin dropped. The arrogance that had propped him up for 35 years drained out of him like water from a cracked bucket. The judge set sentencing for the following month. She denied bail pending sentencing. The deputies handcuffed Wade and led him away. He passed within 3 feet of me on his way out. Our eyes met. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. What was there to say? The trial was over. The truth was out. The man who'd tried to steal my life was going to prison for a very long time. But standing there in the courtroom, surrounded by reporters and lawyers and women who'd finally been heard, I realized something. This wasn't a victory. Victory implied a battle. A fight. A contest with winners and losers. This was something simpler than that. Something quieter. This was the truth finally being spoken aloud. And the truth, it turned out, was heavier than victory but lighter than silence. Danny came up to me in the hallway. His eyes were red. "IW was so scared," he said. "Up th there. Talking." "I know. But I did it anyway." "Yes, you did." He looked at his hands. They were still shaking. My mom wants to meet you. She says thank you. For the L lawyer. For the P papers. She's not scared anymore either. Tell her she's welcome. Tell her she never has to be scared again." Danny nodded. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something else. Something bigger. But the words wouldn't come. So he just put his cap on his head, nodded one more time, and walked away. I watched him go. That boy who'd been too scared to speak. That boy who'd told the truth anyway. That boy who'd saved my life without even knowing it. There was a story there. A good one. Maybe someday I'd tell it. But not today. Today, I had somewhere else to be. The cemetery was empty when I got there. The sun was setting behind the tree line, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed too soft for a day like this. I walked past Randy's grave without stopping. The dirt was still fresh. No headstone yet. I hadn't ordered one. I wasn't sure I ever would. I walked to the small stone. The one half hidden by dead grass. Baby boy Hollis. March 12, 1989. Safely home. I knelt in the frozen grass. The cold seeped through my dress, through my coat, into my bones. I didn't care. "I did it," I whispered. "I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if any of this matters. But I did it. I told the truth. I made them listen." The wind picked up. Rattled the dead grass. Made the bare branches creak. "When you died, I thought I'd never be strong again. I thought some part of me died with you and I'd spend the rest of my life just carrying around the empty space where it used to be." I touched the stone. The letters were cold under my fingers. But I was wrong. The strength was still there. It was just buried. Buried under 37 years of silence. Buried under a man who told me I was nothing. I sat there for a long time. The sun disappeared. The stars came out. The cold grew teeth. But I wasn't ready to leave. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you," I said. "I'm sorry I couldn't give you a life. I'm sorry I spent so many years being broken when I could have been strong. But I'm strong now. I'm strong for both of us." The wind died down. The cemetery went quiet. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in 37 years. Peace. Not happiness. Not closure. Not the kind of neat, tidy ending that fits in a greeting card. Just peace. The deep, still quiet of a heart that had finally stopped fighting. I stood up. Brushed the dirt off my dress. Walked back to my truck. The farm was waiting. Spring came late that year. The fields were slow to thaw. The cows were restless. Danny fixed the fence I'd been meaning to mend, and I paid him double what Randy ever had, and neither of us mentioned the stutter he was slowly learning to stop apologizing for. The witnesses met every Thursday in my kitchen. 11 women became 15. 15 became 23. Word spread the way word spreads in small towns, slowly at first, then all at once. Women drove in from 3 counties away with their folders and their shoeboxes and their stories. We drank coffee. We compared documents. We built cases. Doreen's husband signed the divorce papers in April. He gave her the house and half his pension without a fight. "He knows I've got 23 witnesses," she said, and laughed her hard, barking laugh. Coward. Crystal's father-in-law was convicted of insurance fraud in May. She and the baby moved into a little house on the edge of town with a fenced yard and a dog she'd rescued from the shelter. "We're both starting over," she said. Martha Higgins died in June. peacefully, in her sleep, with her cane propped against the nightstand and her Bible open on her chest. I spoke at her funeral. I didn't shove anyone off the pulpit this time. She taught me something, I told the congregation. She taught me that it's never too late to tell the truth. Never too late to stand up. Never too late to become the person you should have been all along. I paused. Looked at the coffin. Smiled. She also taught me that church coffee is terrible and someone really ought to buy a new percolator. So in her memory, I'm donating one. You're welcome. The congregation laughed. It was the good kind of laughter. The kind that heals. Wade was sentenced to 25 years. Derek Powell got 15. Judge Thornton died of a heart attack before his trial even started, which felt like cheating but also felt like something. The network was dismantled. The fraudulent loans were voided. The farm was mine, free and clear, with no debts and no liens and no dead men's signatures dragging it down. The farm was mine. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I still couldn't believe it. One evening in July, I sat on my front porch with a glass of sweet tea and watched the sun set over the fields. The cows were in the barn. The fence was mended. The porch light was on, its new bulb glowing warm and steady against the gathering dark. Danny's truck pulled up the driveway. He'd been in town picking up parts for the baler. He parked and walked up to the porch, and for the first time since I'd known him, he didn't look nervous. "And Mrs. Hollis, I wanted to show you something." He handed me a piece of paper. An acceptance letter. Tennessee State University. Agricultural Mechanics Program. Danny. I can know. I'm N19. I should have gone years ago. But I didn't think I was smart enough. And now? He thought about it. His lips moved like he was testing out the words before he said them. And now I think maybe I am. I stood up. Put my arms around him. He stiffened for a moment. Boys taught not to cry are also taught not to hug, and then he hugged me back. "I'm proud of you," I said. "I couldn't have done it without you." "You could have. You just needed someone to tell you that." He pulled back. His eyes were wet, but he was smiling. "I'll come back on weekends. To help with the farm." "You don't have to." "I want to." He paused. "This is home." He drove away a few minutes later. I watched his taillights disappear down the county road, the same road where the stranger's truck had idled all those months ago. But the stranger was in prison now. And Danny was going to college. Funny how things work out. I sat back down on the porch. The sky was dark now. The stars were out. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. 3 houses away, maybe 4. The sound was lonesome but not sad. I thought about Randy. Not with anger anymore. Not with grief. Just with the quiet curiosity you feel when you look at an old photograph of someone you used to be. He'd tried to break me. He'd failed. Not because I was stronger than him, though I was, but because he'd underestimated the thing he should have understood best. Farm women are patient. You can't rush a harvest. You can't hurry a calf. You can't make the corn grow faster by yelling at it. You just do the work. Day after day. Season after season. And you trust that eventually, if you keep showing up, something will grow. I'd been showing up for 58 years. And finally, the harvest had come. The screen door creaked. The porch light hummed. The farm settled into the quiet rhythm of a summer night. I picked up my sweet tea. Took a sip. Let the cool sweetness wash away the dust of the day. Tomorrow there would be cows to milk and fences to check and women to help and 1,000 small things that needed doing. But tonight, there was just the porch. The stars. The silence. And a woman who had finally, after all these years, learned to sit still and call it peace. The next morning, I woke up at dawn the way I always did. Put on my boots. walked to the barn. The cows were waiting, their warm breath making clouds in the cool morning air. Danny was already there. He wasn't supposed to start until after he got back from orientation, but there he was, milking the Holstein in the back stall like he'd never left. "Why, you're out of coffee," he said. I checked. "I'll add it to the grocery list." He grinned. Went back to milking. I stood in the barn doorway for a long moment, looking out at the fields. My fields. My farm. My life. Then I picked up a bucket and got to work.